Denny, how you doing? Welcome into the Player's Perspective Uncensored podcast. It's a pleasure to have you on. Know you're a busy man, but I appreciate you taking a little bit of time out of your day to come through and talk bourbon with us.
No, man, glad to do it. Glad to do it. It sounds like we have a few mutual friends. So I definitely heard about your podcast, and once it was mentioned that, hey, would you be willing to do this? I was like, hell yeah, yeah. So no, man, thanks for having me on. Glad to do it.
Oh, no problem, no problem. So let's get into it, right into it. Tell me about your background and your journey to becoming a master distiller at Makers. And it's not your first stop as being a master distiller. You have a background with some other companies, but tell us about your journey to becoming the master distiller at Makers.
Sure. I mean, master distiller, it's not something that, at least back in the day, I'm 47. So back when I was in college, it wasn't anything that anybody set out to do. I mean, breweries and distilleries weren't necessarily looked at as big manufacturers or anything like that. So I originally wanted to be a marine biologist. That's what I wanted to be. And that's what led me to go into biology. And, it's one of those things that you quickly realize, especially as you build up some debt and other things, that marine biologists don't make that much money, man. So it led me into kind of the technical side and the lab side. So I started out as a lab tech at Beam in '98, and lucky enough that that my first week on the job met Freddie No, who we call him Big Fred, but Big Fred is a good friend of mine, lives not even a mile away from me. And then I actually got to meet his dad, Booker No, within the first couple of weeks, because I was taking him distillate samples to his house so that he could approve them for Booker's. And so it just, it's one of those things. Once I got into the industry, being on the technical side and the lab side, I learned a lot of the science behind what we were doing and why we were doing it, and how to build controls so that we can make sure we were consistent. But I also knew that I wanted to move into operations. And so did the lab at Beam, got into operations at Beam, and then came to Makers in 2003. And lucky for me, meet Bill Samuels. Bill's going to be 80 this month. His parents started Maker's Mark. I work for Rob, his son, who took over for his dad a few years back. But, I meet Bill Samuels, and then at the time, we didn't know it, but when I started here, there were 3 master distillers here at the time that we really didn't know. You had Steve Nally, who, is in the Bourbon Hall of Fame and is at Birdstown Bourbon. You had Dave Pickerel, who Dave is obviously, from a lot of the things he's done, especially on the craft side, has a very big name. Unfortunately, he passed away last year. And then you had Kevin Smith, who was a master distiller as well. And then, at Makers, I was here the first time I was here for 7 years, took over the distillery when Steve Nally decided to retire, and then worked my way up to becoming assistant master distiller. So, the title master distiller, I mean, I love it. I think it's a very prestigious title. It's something, within the industry, you certainly, there's a lot of pride in that, but I'll be honest with you, Larry, it's a bullshit title. So, the title is, I mean, when I say that, it's born out of marketing. Mm-hmm. Because I have, we run 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, and I got 20 people over in that distillery right behind me right now that could all qualify as master distillers if you're looking at the technical side of the business, because that's what they do, right? But there's a lot more to it. That title is really more about the marketing side, which is to go out and talk to people about what we do, how we do it, why we do it, be a bit of a brand ambassador. The title carries a lot of weight. So when you do get in front of people, they tend to, you kind of have their attention, so they're listening. And so it's extremely, it's one of those things that when it's bestowed upon you, I mean, you're absolutely just beside yourself. But, the title from an operations standpoint is really more marketing than it is operations. But long story short, I became assistant master distiller here at Makers, working under Kevin Smith, who was our master distiller. And the main reason for that was because we do a lot of stuff here on site at Makers in Loretto, where we would give VIP tours, VIP tastings, things like that. And they just recognized the fact that I was a pretty good BSer. I was somebody that would talk, and just wasn't too nervous in front of a group of people.
Right.
And but also was the distillery manager, so I had a lot of things working to my advantage, much like Kevin had at the same time. So was doing that, loved running the distillery here, and just out of the blue, Makers is a part of a company that has a lot of different operations, and was approached about running a rum distillery down in the Virgin Islands. We had just acquired them, Crucian Rum, down in St. Croix. And so they asked me if I would go run that facility for 3 years, kind of on board them. There were a lot of things we had to do, from an investment standpoint. But the whole idea was go there for 3 years and then come back to Makers. Unbelievable experience. That's a whole nother podcast talking about Crucian and, the experience in the VI. But, when it was time to come back, I didn't get the opportunity to come back to Makers. I went to another facility. I did love that, but it was one of those things, man, it just didn't feel right. And I got offered an opportunity to go to Heaven Hill as their distillery plant manager. And then ended up after a couple years taking over for Parker Beam as Master Distiller. Parker had been diagnosed with ALS, and that marketing side of that job of the travel, the tastings, the educations, Parker just, it was an energy drain on him, and he just really couldn't do that. And obviously he had other things he needed to focus on. So the Shapira family, which is the family that founded Heaven Hill, asked if I would become their master distiller. So that was probably late 2014. So I became Heaven Hill's master distiller and had a great job, man. Bourbon, some of the bourbons that they put out, or
Right.
American whiskeys in general. Really have the
biggest
world
company
in
the game.
Yeah, really is. And but I just got I got this kind of text out of the blue from Rob Samuels about 2 years ago, and just said, "Hey man, give me a call. Would love to catch up." And next thing you know, he's asking if I'd ever be interested in coming back to Maker's Mark. And if you know this brand, and if you've ever been to this facility, you know that it's just a phenomenal place, right? It's a brand born out of the Samuels family 66 years ago. We run, the same mash bill. We do all these things that what we call purposely inefficient that we've been doing for 66 years, but we do it because there's a reason behind it. And it's all about, that brand being, just a quality brand that people can appreciate. And so long story short, decided to leave Heaven Hill and come back to Maker's Mark. So that was a little over a year and a half ago. So in October of 2018, came back to Makers as plant manager and master distiller. That's my other job is, from an operations standpoint, is running the plant. We have about 240 employees. As I said, we run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So, I get a lot of joy out of the operations side. So we're, it's been a little bit different here lately, just because we don't have any visitors and, there's no travel or anything like that. But it's been awfully nice too, to spend all the time here at the distillery. So in a nutshell, I've been in the industry for roughly 23 years. And, the role of the master distiller just, man, I don't know. It sure in the hell wasn't a straight line. I think it's just one of those, you kind of work your way into it, and people recognize the fact that you might be good at, telling the story of the brand and showing the passion for the brand and why we do what we do. And I guess I've just been very, very, very lucky. No doubt.
Home is where the heart is, man. And it's pretty cool to hear about the other things that go into being a master distiller, because when I think of master distiller, I think of somebody that goes around and, tastes some of each barrel and just tasting and making sure that the barrel is ready, or determining if it's not ready. And so it's pretty cool to hear about other things that go into the job description of being a master distiller. Now,
that's definitely part of it. Yes.
Right. Now, what's probably the most important trait when it comes to being a master distiller? Probably more so on the tasting side of that question.
Yeah, I think there's a few things. One is having a passion to do it, right?
Right.
As a master distiller, and we have other people, but I'm part of a group from a taste panel aspect that smell and taste every single day. But you have to have a passion for that. we don't drink 24 hours a day, but we have to taste pretty much every day. And that a lot of times that starts at 8 in the morning. And it's really, it really is about understanding why we're doing it and what we're looking for. And for makers, in a way, I'm lucky because we have a brand that has been around for 66 years that has a very distinct taste profile. So my job tasting is just trying to figure out, is this consistent, right? Looking for things that shouldn't be there. But, so the aspect really is being able to lock in and kind of distinguish what you're tasting, what you're smelling, because from a distillate standpoint, I probably do more distillate samples than anything. And you're not going to taste those every day. You're really going to smell them. And then being able to verbalize what you're tasting and smelling, because usually you have a group of people that you're talking to. So from a tasting aspect, I think it's a combination of all that is, just to have the ability to verbalize with other people what you're tasting, along with the talent to tell, what shouldn't be there, or, specifically if you're looking for something specific in the beginning, are you reaching that? Are you getting to that? And we can talk a little bit about that with RC6, because that was kind of the goal. From an operation standpoint, I think the number one trait for a master distiller is you have to have patience. We can't just create a new mash bill or utilize a new type of barrel or, change things up in the maturation process and then get the result of that the next day.
Right.
So, there are things that we do today, we get all hyped up about something we're trying in the distillery, then we do it and it goes in the barrel and it's like, damn. So for us, it's about 6 years later. And so you can't, you just have to, you kind of have to temper that a little bit, but you do, you kind of get to that point, you enjoy the process. The end product is fantastic. You always want to be validated, but you have to enjoy just the process before you even get there.
Now, is there more of a focus on being consistent and having a consistent taste to your bourbon, or is there also more focus on being innovative and coming up with unique tastes and different tastes to come up with different types of bourbon?
Yeah, Larry, it's both, to be honest. For us, because when the Samuel started us out back in 1954 and we did that first barrel, that had a very specific taste profile: sweet, smooth, finish on the tip of the tongue, no bitterness. So, 95% of what we do is that mash bill in that taste vision, which is what we call, the classic makers. So that is a big part of my job. And I take a lot of pride in the fact that we try to nail that every single day, what they created 66 years ago. But, as we're going to taste, there is, the consumer's changed drastically in the last 5 to 10 years. And, people are interested in new and unique and understanding, how you got to that finished product. And so, it is a combination of both, but there's no doubt consumers are genuinely interested in new and different. And, we do that. It's not something that is going to consume us, but it's got to be something that we have a focus on. And we have an innovation department led by Jane Bowie and Beth Buckner. And so that's their job every day, is to stay focused on this wood finishing, on, all these other things that, whether it's, just the grains that we grow and how farming practices can actually influence flavor coming off the still. So there is a lot of that. And we got to make sure, for the longest time, we didn't do anything different. It's about 55 years that we just did classic makers. And then, Bill Jr. basically said, what, one, he had a taste vision, but he also recognized the fact that we need to do something a little bit different because people are interested in that. And that's when we created Makers 46. So that's been on the market for about 10 years.
Nice. Now, one of the things that we've been dealing with in the last, I don't know how many years, let's say 10, 15 years, has been global warming. How has that affected the grains that you guys grow and the aging process and the effect on the taste, and how are you really being consistent with that taste with the global warming? What effect has that taken on you guys as far as creating a bourbon?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, especially from the grain side, because I don't know that we've ever, as an industry that outside of identifying, well, corn gives this flavor and wheat gives this flavor and malt adds this and rye does this. I don't know that we've ever fully understood how impacts of weather and climate and soil can influence flavor of grain. So part of what we're doing right now is to understand that, and we have a partnership with the University of Kentucky, and a lot of what they're doing there to try to get to that point that we can understand it. I can tell you from just the global warming aspect from the grains, it does impact yield. How much corn you get per bushel or how much wheat. But on the flip side of that, we just had a freeze that occurred in May that impacts the yield of wheat. So there's just so many variables. We know that from a grain aspect, it does have an influence, whether that's flavor or whether that's just volume. I think we just got to weed through that. From a barrel standpoint and a barrel maturation standpoint, once again, it's kind of hard to absolutely pinpoint what is global warming because there's so many variables that go into the maturation process. I'll tell you, I mean, there's no doubt it'll have an impact on your angel share, or what we call the recovery. So the amount of alcohol that evaporates out of that barrel by the time you dump it. We've seen swings in our angel share where we get good recovery and then they kind of drop back down. We know that global warming has an impact on that. As you get into hot summers, that is going to impact the amount that evaporates out of that barrel, which in turn will impact the flavor of that barrel. So, we have recognized that you do see, that's the reason why we say fully mature. We don't, Makers isn't age stated because we do understand that climate plays an impact on the flavor of that whiskey. So we kind of reserve the right to move the age a little bit, which is always around 6 years, always, so that we can really try to nail that consistent liquid quality. So it's, it is something that does impact the finished product. You just got to be paying attention to it today, because what we don't want is 10 years from now all of a sudden going, wow, this tastes completely different, and why. So a lot of this now is just really understanding the baseline and knowing when we're getting those dips and those peaks, and then really trying to equate the data with what we're seeing and how that impacts flavor. So there's a lot of that that Jane and Beth are working on here at Makers, and then as an industry we're paying attention to.
Right. Now, you said that Makers operates on a full cycle, 365, 24 hours, 7 days a week. So how many barrels or gallons of bourbon do you produce a day?
So we will roughly, barrels per day coming off the still is going to be about 550 to 600 barrels. So, and then volume's a little bit different because it depends on what, we go off of what's called a proof gallon, and which is a normalized, because, let's say you got a 5-gallon bucket. Well, a 5-gallon bucket that has, let's say 90 proof whiskey in it, and you got a 5-gallon bucket that has 120 proof whiskey in it. Well, there's actually, even though it's the same volume, you have more alcohol with the 120 proof, right? Because if you add water to it, increases the volume. So we do everything. We normalize it based on proof gallons, which is at 100 proof. So we go in the barrel at 110. So our barrels are at 58.3 proof gallons. So we're about 34 to 35,000 proof gallons per day. Nice. So that's basically a tank that is at 100 proof. So 35,000 gallons at 100 proof.
Okay. Now, with the COVID-19, there was a passing of the House Bill 415 that allowed you guys to go directly from distiller to consumer. How has that shipping and delivery had effect on the demand for you guys?
Well, for us, we're not, and I don't know many people that are direct shipping yet on the bourbon side. It's something that we're planning for, but it's not, one of the things is, obviously we've had the 3-tier system in place here in the US for a long time. Mm-hmm. And we have incredible distributor partners. Like we can't like they're so needed because, you know, they just have a network of people that are in the on-premise, so the bars and restaurants, in the liquor stores. And I mean, that is such an important part of our business because, you still there, Larry?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, it just blacked out for a second.
Oh, okay.
Because that's, you know, they're the ones that we rely on that really reach out to the consumer. Now, what we're looking at as far as direct ship or kind of like the distillery exclusive stuff. So those things that, you know, whether it might be the 101, whether it might be, you know, a wood finishing release, that's what we're looking to do. We're hoping to have, you know, kind of that structure in place by or I'd say August, September. We're not doing it just yet. It's not going to be anything high volume. We don't ever see a scenario where we're direct shipping, you know, classic makers or anything like that. But maybe some of these, you know, products that aren't nationally distributed, we're looking to, you know, obviously create a program where we can direct ship some of those.
Right. So since your promotion, I don't want to say promotion, but since you've taken over as Master Distiller or one of the Master Distillers, what is your goal for Makers? What is your goals or something that you set out that you want to accomplish for the company?
You know, for me, one is, I mean, and this goes back to, you know, literally my first week when I came to Makers the first time back in 2003, as Bill Jr. told me, don't F it up. I mean, you know, that's what his parents started something that has been, you know, wildly successful. So, you know, for me, it's, you know, obviously when I retire and step away, you know, I want to make sure I can look back and say, I did, right? I didn't screw it up. So, you know, that's really important to me. And then, you know, the other side of it too is, you know, I think it's just, did I do things the right way, right? I mean, have we continued to do these things that makes Makers so special? And that's, you know, there's a lot of things, you know, heard me talk about purposely inefficient, that, you know, if it comes from an accounting and finance perspective, we would never do these things because financially they don't make sense, but it's the way we've always done it. Whether it's, you know, using a roller mill instead of a hammer mill, running small batches, you know, running 10,000 gallon mash tubs and fermenters, you know, we could obviously increase the size of that. Going in the barrel at 110 proof instead of 125. That's a big difference. You know, like we could eat today, if we went in at 125, we'd save just on barrels, we'd save $4 million. So rotating barrels, hand dipping every single bottle. Last year we hand dipped 30 million bottles. That's phenomenal. I mean, that's incredible. And, you know, so it's all those things that, you know, as I retire and get out, are we still doing those? And do we still have the same pride in that we've had pretty much from day one? Now, you know, do I like to do? Absolutely. I mean, you know, from the wood finishing releases to a lot of the things we have, you know, in the pipe when it comes to innovation. Yeah, I don't know what that is. I don't know that I really want my name on that, but if that's something that helps tell the story of Maker's Mark and keeps people interested in what we do, then I'm all for it. I'm absolutely all for it.
What's something that you've taken away? A lot of people are trying to hone another skill with the quarantine, obviously with the pandemic going on in the world right now. Everybody's inside and everybody's trying to come up with a useful way of their time. What's something that you've taken away that can make Maker's Mark better during this quarantine?
You know, what's been interesting is, you know, I'm used to going out, either having people here on site to take on a tour or to do a tasting or something like that, or to be on the road. What's really been interesting is just kind of like what you and I are doing. I mean, normally you'd either be here or I'd be, you know, in your studio doing this. It's understanding that we can actually do this. Like, I couldn't tell you how many virtual tastings I've done with people all over the world. And it's not something we ever probably would have done before because we would have felt it's very disconnected, right? Like, that's not who we are. We want to make sure we've got this face-to-face interaction. Right. But I think one of the things we've really learned is, man, people enjoy it. Maybe it's because they know we can't get out and this is kind of the best case scenario, but it has been very effective, especially from an international perspective. I mean, you know, all the different things we've done there. So, you know, there's that side of it. I think from an operations side, it's been very different here at Makers. Like for the first time ever, we haven't been open for tours. And so to not have visitors here on site, like we can't wait for the day that they come back. But there's also been this, I don't know, I mean, you know, just like a connection that's been reinforced amongst all of us that at the end of the day, we're still distilling, we're still bottling, we're still hand dipping, we're still shipping cases out the door. And so the music plays on, and it's such an, you know, it's an important part of, I think, of what people are going through right now. I mean, it's, you know, if we can provide a little bit of relief and happiness and enjoyment just through, you know, having makers available at their local liquor store now as restaurants and bars open up, a part of that. But, you know, I think it's been, you know, those two things is one is we can do things virtually, and it's pretty impactful. And then also just here, not having visitors here, it's just like this place is beautiful. So to walk out in the center of campus and nobody's around is, I mean, it's a very calming feeling. It's pretty incredible.
Yeah. And before we get into the tasting, I really want to say thank you to you guys again for the bottles that we're about to sample. And a friend of mine that helped connect us, For Smallwood, I look forward to watching his story on social media. He's always posting stories, walking through the distillery, walking through different parts, and just the beauty of just some of the scenery that he posts, man, is really, truly amazing. I definitely I can't wait to get down there again and tour the distillery myself.
Yeah, absolutely. We can't wait to have you.
All right, so let's get into, let's start right here with the RC6 first. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about it while I'm opening it up and getting prepared for this tasting.
Yeah, so what RC6 is, you know, this was our very first ever national wood finishing release. So RC6 was really born out of how we created Makers 46. So it's taken classic makers. What 46 is classic makers, and then it's enhanced through this wood finishing process that we created really back in 2009, 2010 when we launched 46, which is where we take classic makers, we dump it out of a barrel, we take staves that have been cooked and toasted in a certain way to elicit very specific flavors. We put these what we call wood finishing staves in the barrel, dump the classic makers back in, seal it up, and then roll it into our cellar where it's very cold. It's like being in a cave, and age it for an additional 9 months or 9 weeks to create, the 46, which is basically makers on steroids, makers amped up. So that's the process. The way RC6 was born, and this was something that Jane Bowie, who pretty much is our director of innovation and has led a lot of these initiatives, they wanted to create a program where we had a wood finishing release every year that really told a story of the process of operations. And so each year we're going to pick certain things that we want to highlight and tell that story. And this was a story about yeast. So the impact that yeast has on the process, specifically, what are some of those smells and tastes that you get from yeast? And so when you think about yeast, you think of hoppy, bright, fruity, spicy, and that was how this was created. So Jane and the team that worked on this initially before I came on board, that was their vision. We want to create something that has all of these things. And so it took 2 years working with Independent Stave to finally find a wood finishing stave that could create this flavor profile. So, on the nose, you're still going to get a lot of, the caramel and the vanilla. You get a little bit of the spice. When you go to taste it, immediately, you think of bright and vibrant. With this one, it definitely has notes of fruit and baking spices, which is really kind of what you get from the yeast process. When you think of the finish, you definitely get a little bit of a longer finish.
Yeah.
Spicy's got a lot of character to it.
Yeah.
And that's, that's really what their vision was day one when they created RC6. And so this was released in the fall of last year. And the reason why it's called RC6, because we're the world's worst at naming things. Just look at Maker's 46. Nobody understands what 46 means. But RC6 is, Independent Stave was the company, they make our barrels. And they're also kind of at the forefront of wood finishing technology, how to treat wood, toast it, cook it, all these things to elicit flavors. And so we've partnered with them for years, so much so through the 46 process, they decided to build a research center at their barrel manufacturing operation in Lebanon, Kentucky, about 9 miles from here. They built a research center. And so the first project they worked on with us out of that research center was this RC6. So RC6 stands for Research Center Stave Profile 6. So this was their Stave 6 that kind of nailed the vision that Jane and the team had going into creating this liquid. So it was released in the fall of last year. We're planning on, a wood finishing release this fall that will be available nationally, not just here at Makers, but across the country. And they're all going to be at barrel proof. So this one's at 108.2. We won't know what the next one is until we dump it and then take the final proof on it. So that's RC6.
Nice. Has a beautiful aroma on the nose. You can really pick up the French and the vanilla, very present, but it's nice, soft taste. Has a good texture to it. Nice old bodies, really feels full on the tongue. Like you said, the finish is long lasting.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's a nice drink. It's a nice drink. Now, let me ask you this.
Have you had that before?
I have not. This is my first time for all three. It's my first time.
Oh, nice, man.
Yeah, my first time for all three. So let's go to the private select now. Maybe you can give us a little background on the private select.
Yep.
Sample this one.
So private select, if you're not familiar with it, is our version of a barrel program. So you have distilleries that can offer up where people come in, accounts come in, consumers, customers, and pick out their barrel of whatever it is, whether it's Knob Creek, Elijah Craig. So, this was something that really started to get popular, probably 6 or 7 years ago. And Makers recognize the fact that it's a popular program. The problem that we have is those programs are popular because, they all are born out of the same mash bill, but where those barrels end up in the warehouse, if they're all the same age, a barrel on the 6th floor at 6 years tastes drastically different than a barrel on the 1st floor at 6 years. So you can come in and pick a 6-year-old and it might taste drastically different. Because we rotate barrels, when we put new barrels in our warehouse for the first 3 years, they're in the top floors of the warehouse. So in a 6-story warehouse, they'll be in floors 4, 5, and 6. After 3 summers, we rotate them down. So floor 6 goes to 1, 5 to 2, 4 to 3. And then they age an additional 3 years. And the reason for that is we want every barrel to taste very close in profile to the one before it and the one after it. So we want consistency from barrel to barrel, not just batch to batch. So when you think about a barrel program for us, we could have people come in and lay 5 barrels out and select their barrel, but at the end of the day, they're not going to taste that much different. So this was something that was really led by Rob Samuels and Jane as well, of how can we create a barrel program that is specific to makers, but yet allows consumers to be a part of the process and have their fingerprint on their style of makers. And this was born out of 46. So when we talk about those 10 flavor staves, we actually have a process where people can come in and pick the 10 staves that they want to put in that barrel to finish their whiskey. So we invite people in, or we can do it remotely. And so they can pick from 5 staves. We have American, what we call Pure 2. We have Cuvée. We have Makers 46. That's one of the staves you can pick. We have a Mocha stave, and we have a Spice stave. So you have 5 staves that you can pick, total of 10, to create your version of makers, right? So this is one that was created by what's called Star Hill Provisions. And so this is the one we sent you, Larry, that was created by our restaurant on site. So we have a restaurant on site that does lunch every day. We do dinners on the weekends, but they do cocktails. So they wanted to create their version of makers that would go well, neat on the rocks, but specifically in an old fashioned or a Manhattan. So this specific Maker's Private Select is heavy on the cuvee stave. So with cuvee, you're going to get a lot of oak, toast, spice. It's going to be very creamy and rich, so it's going to be kind of deep on kind of the mouthfeel. You might even get a little bit of butterscotch on this. This is at 108.9 proof, so this is at cask strength as well. So when you nose it, I get butterscotch on the nose almost immediately.
Yeah.
And then obviously I get a little
more
bit of
caramel butterscotch than in this one, yeah.
And then when you taste it, that spice in that toast to me really comes through. The toast really starts to finish. It's creamy, but it's it almost finishes a little dry. And some of that is because they use a mocha stave in this, and mocha, it's not like your typical candy chocolate that you think of. It's more of like the powder chocolate or the baking chocolate that you use. So it can add a little bit of dryness on that finish. So it's creamy up front, but it's kind of dry on the finish. So it's got pretty good texture to it. But we make a house old fashioned with this at the Maker's restaurant. So it's been very well received. Once again, there's 1,001 different combinations. And, we have people come in, mainly bars and restaurants, but we do have a lot of liquor stores that will come in and create their version of Makers and then sell it with their name on the bottle. So it's been very, very well received in the market.
Nice. Now, while I'm getting ready while I'm cleaning my glass, you said that you guys typically age your bourbon 6 years. Now, for me, I've been in the bourbon journey for about a year now. And a lot of the bourbons that I've sort of come to prefer have been aged roughly 10 to 12 years. Now, have you guys considered doing a bourbon that was aged maybe a little longer than 6 years and going over that? Or is that kind of like, that's the franchise, that's what we've had success with, and that's what we're going to stay with? Consistency?
Yeah, it's
kind of like...
yes, we've thought about it. It's one of those, it is a very, we do get that question. For us, the 6 years meets the taste profile that Bill and Margie Samuels created 66 years ago, which was that, sweet, smooth finish on the tip of the tongue, no bitterness. So for makers, if you're sticking to that vision, if you start to get over, if you're getting over 7 years, it's not that it's bad at all. It's just not necessarily our vision
Makers
of who we are. Doesn't mean we will never do it. I'd never say never. 10 years ago, we probably, we'll never do that. But there wasn't, as much of an interest in a lot of these different products. And what you've said, there is a wheelhouse that people kind of fall in, especially when it comes to rye bourbons. That 8 to 12 year is a lot of people's sweet spot. Mm-hmm. Wheated bourbons like us, they can swing either way. It just depends. So I'm not surprised to hear you say that, because there are some really, really good rye bourbons that are in that 8 to 12 year range. For us, we're not, because anything that you hold back for, 10 to 12 years comes out of what we have available today. So it does impact, the amount of makers we have available to the market today. So all those things come into consideration. I would never say never. I will tell you 10 to 12 years tastes damn good. It's just, it's not the vision that was initially created for us. And there might be an opportunity at some point where we might do something like that. And I know people will love it. People will love it just because they'll see that it's a 10 to 12 year old. And, one of the things that I tell people all the time is, please don't ever judge the quality of a bourbon on age or price. especially price. You know, that's one of
Right.
the phenomenal bourbons out there for, you know, under $40 that will absolutely knock your socks off. And then obviously there are some that a lot more than that that are damn good, but they're, you know, bourbons that are underneath, you know, $40, even $30. You know, us for makers is typically $25. Just don't get hung up on price. You know, when you get in that secondary market, man, you know, those prices shoot up pretty quick. And
Yeah, they
not saying
do.
it's not worth it. I mean, you know, there is some stuff. You know, having a bourbon that's rare is pretty cool. It really is. You invite people over, and people get to try something that they may not ever get to try again. But for us, it's, and so as far as a 10 to 12-year-old, I'd never say never. Not a focal point for us right now, though.
And I'm big on the weeded bourbon. I've tried a lot of bourbons, and I'm still learning my palate. Excuse me, Denny. Charging up here. And I love a weeded bourbon because I love the sweeter taste. I love the softer tone of it, and so it's really one of my go-tos. If I had to choose a bourbon, a rye, or straight bourbon, or weeded, I'm going to prefer the weeded bourbon.
It's,
sure.
I mean, you know, and I just speak to makers, but you know, one of the things that I think is incredible about, you know, our classic makers is, yeah, it's been around for 66 years. Is it new? Not, no, but we take pride in that, right? But one of the things that I love about our classic makers, to me, it's one of, if not the best universal bourbon on the market. And what I mean by that is, man, if I'm going to U of L tailgate, I'm going to take a 175 of makers, right? I don't know how people like to drink their bourbon, but if you want it neat, on the rocks, old fashioned, ginger ale, Coke, you name it, classic is going to get you there. So I do think that weeded bourbons can tend to be a little more versatile when it comes to how you mix them.
Mm-hmm.
But they're all good, man. I mean, they're all good. People are, at the end of the day, you know, people just have their own preferences that have built up, you know, from their experiences. And I'm just glad that, you know, hopefully people enjoy drinking makers, and we kind of check that box for them.
Right. And as we move on to the next sample of 101, I will tell you this. Makers was definitely the first bourbon that I tried. I think living in Louisville, Kentucky, I think, you know, if you ever were to try bourbon, or if you were to ever, you know, start your journey, bourbon Makers is usually the first thing that comes to mind, or the first thing that you're going to try. And so Makers definitely was my first bourbon that I tried. Yeah. So now we have the Makers 101. Maybe you could tell us about that a little bit.
So, you know, Makers 101 is actually, it's not something new. It's something that we did back in the day. It was a gold wax. You know, it's kind of a little bit like the cast strength bottle that we have out now, but with the gold wax. So the 101 is not something that's nationally distributed. It's available here at our gift shop. It's available at duty free. So what we call GTR, Global Travel Retail. So as you travel, especially international, you'll see that you can find the 101. There is a strong push from people that have tried this to release this on a national scale. So, you know, we're weeding through that right now. There's a lot of talk about it. It is a phenomenal liquid. So Makers 101 is, for the most part, you know, completely unadulterated, outside of, you know, usually when we dump a barrel, we're between 108 to 112 proof. And so this one is cut to 101 proof. And so, you know, it's, you know, as you've got sitting in front of you, I mean, it's a beautiful package. So we absolutely love that. What I love about the Makers 101, and this has gotten to be one of the favorites for the people that work here at Makers, is it's extremely sweet, smooth. It's nice and mellow. It's got great caramel and vanilla notes, and it's just got a nice, easy linger. So, you know, it's not something that's going to, you know, be super overpowering, but you get enough character in it that you can walk away going, man, I really enjoyed that. So that's kind of what you get with this 101. very smooth. I mean, this is one that, as you drink it, you don't get, you don't get burned hardly at all with many of our products, but this is one that's just nice and smooth, great finish, hangs around just long enough. This is neat on the rocks. If you want to make a cocktail with it, I would suggest our cast strength for classic cocktails, or maybe 46 if you want to go that way. I love this one, neater on the rocks. And it's so funny because people here at the distillery, this is one of their favorites. I mean, we haven't been doing it for very long, or haven't brought it back for very long, but we'll see what happens with this one. It's people, we'll taste when the public comes through on their public tours. A lot of times we'll have that on the panel, and everybody wants to go buy a bottle of 101. So it's good. So I'm curious, what's your take on it? You've never had this before?
I've never had it. Very smooth. Feel it breathing. Pretty good energy. Very smooth. Like you said, none of the bourbons here, there's no heat and transition really.
Yeah.
And so
yeah, right. That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah. There's no heat. And so this one's kind of it's kind of like a lighter caramel. The RC was definitely more oaky and vanilla. The 46 definitely had a stronger presence of caramel. This one has a lighter presence of caramel. Little marshmallows in there. Little marshmallows.
Yeah, we've actually gotten that note before. Maybe a hint of cherry.
Yeah.
But I've actually heard that descriptor more than once.
But this one has when I warm it up, it has a little more energy on the nose than 101. It has a little bit more energy. But let me ask you this, because I've always been curious about having bourbon on the rocks versus having bourbon neat. Tell me your preference about which bourbons you prefer to have on the rocks and which ones you prefer to have neat. Because when I have bourbon on the rocks, most time it's a cocktail and I'm mixing it with a little splash of ginger ale. I've never really had bourbon by itself on the rocks. So give me your sort of take on when you sort of put ice in it and when you sort of have it neat.
Yeah, I mean, once again, and I know, there are people out there that if I say I drink, bourbon straight with some rocks, I mean, they're going to absolutely flip their lid. But, I mean, obviously with cocktail, and then when you get into cocktails like Manhattans, you want it on the rocks, you want it up. I mean, there's all that debate. What I'll say is, I mean, I love bourbon neat. I just think it's consistent, it's unadulterated, it's not going to get watered down. What I will tell you is, I love to drink, cast strength bourbons on the rocks. And the reason why I say that is I think adding a couple cubes as the ice melts and drops the proof of that cast strength, you get intermittent changes in taste profile. And it's amazing if you think about what you're tasting at the beginning and then what you taste at the end after the ice is melted. It can be phenomenally different. I love that because I just love the fact that I poured a glass, added a couple cubes, and what I started with doesn't taste like what I finished with, but it's still good. And I go back and forth. I mean, there are times at home, it's just kind of my mood. I mean, what do I feel like? Do I want to use a little bit of ice? Do I want to? I'm a neater on the rocks guy. One, I like it that way. Two, I'm a terrible bartender. I'm not good, man. I mean, there are plenty of other people out there that are good at mixing drinks, and I'm not one of them. So it's easy. I can't screw it up if I'm just, doing it neater on the rocks. But it's, I'm with you. It's however you enjoy it, and depending on the mood. I mean, that's the other thing too. Like if I'm going to a football game, I mean, I'm telling you, man, I'm not drinking bourbon neat at 10 in the morning. If we've got a noon kickoff and I'm drinking it neat, I'm gonna drink it just as fast as if I'm drinking it on the rocks and the ice is melting. So I want to make kickoff. So I mean, you got to think about that too. I mean, you can't get completely bombed.
Right. So before we get to our bird proof segment of rapid fire questions, I want to ask you this last question that I'm gonna leave you with. What do you want your legacy at Maker's Mark to be?
I mean, I think for me, I just want to be known as somebody that treated people right and did things the right way. I mean, it's as simple as that. It's not, and maybe this is more the operations guy in me than it is, you know, kind of the marketing side. You know, I just want to be known as not necessarily for the liquid, but just how I did things, right? You know, how I helped people do their job, how I helped maintain the legacy of makers, and you know, just make sure that we're on, you know, pretty stable ground when I retire, and that, you know, we're a generational operation. I mean, you know, we have people that work here that their kids work here, people that have retired, their grandkids are working here. You know, I think for me, I think, you know, the legacy is how I treated people, and did I do things the right way, and did I F anything up? You know, it goes back to what Bill said that first week. And, you know, if I can check all those boxes, I'll be happy. I'll be happy. I love the liquid side of it. Don't get me wrong. But if I were to tell you that I was going to tie my legacy to liquid, then it's just, that's not being genuine, to be honest.
Right. Well, Denny, now we've reached a part of the podcast that we like to call the Burr Proof segment. We're going to shoot you some rapid fire questions. We don't want you to give it a lot of thought. Just give us your first answer. We're going to roll with it.
All right, man. I've been looking forward to this.
First question. Your favorite age range for bourbon?
Obviously, for wheated bourbon, I love where we are on the 6 year. I think I kind of tipped my hat. If you're looking at a bourbon rye, I think it's at 8 to 12, man. I mean, I love that 8 to 12 year range. I'm like you.
Nice. Your favorite NBA team?
It's the Pacers. You know, I was born in Louisville. My parents are actually from the west end of Louisville, so we, you know, as a kid, lived my life. But like in 5th or 6th grade, moved to Indiana. So I went to IU, and obviously, I wish to God Louisville had an NBA team, man, because I would be sitting here waving that flag right now. But it's definitely the Pacers.
Nice. So what'd you think about The Last Dance when you saw the last episode with Reggie Miller versus Jordan?
Man, you know, I love that. I mean, I remember that. I mean, you know, it was pretty incredible. I mean, you know, Reggie Miller, you look at the guy, you never think that he could take over a game the way he did. But I mean, you know, mentally, and then obviously I'd love to see, I don't know, maybe they've done a 30 for 30 on Reggie Miller and Spike Lee and that whole dynamic with the Knicks. But The Last Dance, they couldn't have timed releasing that any better. I mean, it really took me back, because that was back when, you know, when the Bulls were dominating towards the end of my high school career, and then obviously into college. But it was heartbreaking, man. That Game 7 was heartbreaking. It was heartbreaking because you knew. I mean, the Pacers they're kind of on limited time, and you just knew, man, it ain't going to happen.
Right, right. And I just love to watch the matchup between Jordan and Reggie Miller, because Reggie Miller just had that dog, man. And he just,
oh, my God,
just loved to compete, man.
Yeah, he could. I mean, you know, I mean, they all got a little bit of trash talk in them, but I don't know of anybody outside of Jordan and a few other guys that could back it up the way Reggie did.
Yeah, I hope they put a statue outside of the Coliseum for Reggie, man.
I think so, man. I think it's going to happen at some point.
What complements a bourbon better, steak or cigar?
I'm going to definitely say steak. I'm not. I mean, you know, I smoke cigars on occasion. I just, for whatever reason, I just can't do it, man. I mean, if I'm drinking and I smoke a cigar, it's like I get lightheaded. I don't know, man. I just can't. I can't figure it out. But definitely steak and bourbon, no question.
Nice. Your favorite part of the distillery that makes you feel at home or makes you recognize how much of a privilege it is to be a master distiller?
Oh, man, that's a good question. You know, I think my favorite part is when I pull in the mornings and things are quiet, but all you hear are the sounds coming from the distillery, even as you walk up, right? You know, you hear the mill running, you hear the grain conveyors, you hear the steam running through the stills. I mean, that to me, that moment when you first walk up, I mean, every single day, and especially here at Makers, the way this place looks and the way it's built, every day that I get out of my truck and I hear that and I smell that and I see that, it's like I am definitely the luckiest person in the world, no question.
Nice. Who's the greatest basketball player of all time?
Oh, shit. I mean, it's got to be Jordan. I mean, I've thought that before, and then even after watching The Last Dance, just unbelievable. I mean, just absolutely incredible. So, that's I love LeBron. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, I think he's incredible. It's just it's a different game now. And yeah, hell, I'd love to see that matchup. And Kobe as well. Obviously Kobe was coming in towards the end of Jordan's career, but I mean, I don't know that I could go away from Jordan, man.
Nice. Well, you kind of already answered this earlier, but on a scale of 10, how good are your bartending skills?
It's a 1, man. It's a 1, no doubt.
This is a question that we call franchise sign and wave. You got to franchise a guy who you're going to build your franchise around. You got to sign a guy that you're going to keep on your team, and you got to waive a guy that you can't keep. We're going to go 2-guard edition. We're going to go Dwayne Wade, James Harden, and Allen Iverson.
Oh my God. I'm going, maybe this is just me going back to my younger days, but I'm going Wade and Iverson.
Who are you franchising? Who are you building your team around?
So this is all.
So you got a franchise. You got to put a franchise on a guy. Like, this is the guy I'm building my team around. And then you got to sign a guy who you're keeping on your team.
All right. God, this is tough, man. I think I'm going to go with Harden, building the franchise around.
Building a franchise around Harden. Okay.
I think so. There's still hope.
Who you signing?
Listen, you're the resident expert when it comes to this. I'm just taking a wild stab at this one. And so, am I trading away a guy?
You building your franchise around Harden. Who you signing? You got to sign somebody that you're keeping between Iverson and Wade.
God bless. Oh man, I'm signing Wade, trading Iverson.
Ooh, the fans are going to kill you either way, man.
I feel like I'll regret that one. That's why I'm not a GM. I'd be fired within a month.
One person that you would love to meet.
One person that I would love to meet.
It can be past or present.
God, this is a tough one, man. Larry, I didn't know you were going to throw these at me. Well,
maybe you've met everybody.
What's that?
I said, well,
no, I certainly haven't met everybody. I guess it just depends in a way. I mean, from an industry standpoint, I wish I'd gotten to know Booker. I mean, talking to Fred and, because I was coming into the business and Booker hadn't been involved in the operations he'd been out for probably 2 or 3 years. So if there was somebody that I wish I could go back and, just pick their brain, no doubt it would be Booker from an industry standpoint. On the flip side of that, I'd love, like, my grandfather, my mom's dad, he just a guy, an Irish guy, probably stood about 5 feet tall, that passed away a while ago. It'd be neat to get together with him again. I mean, he had no idea. I think I was just starting out in the industry, and kind of getting a feel for what he thinks about all this. But
nice.
That's a tough question, though.
Last question. Now, with your Maker's bottle, you've had John Calipari on the bottle. You've had Rick Pitino on the bottle. Which side of the line do you fall on? U of L or U of K? All day.
No.
So your son's getting put out of the house soon, right?
Yeah. So my dad graduated from the University of Louisville back in '73. Yeah, because that was the year I was born. And so my son just graduated high school, and he's going to U of L. It's never been a question. I mean, not once. I mean, I was asking him, do you want to go look at any other schools? He's like, nope, I'm going to U of L. So he's going in speed school, starts in August, big time Louisville fan, as am I. I mean, we have season football tickets, season basketball tickets. So yeah, University of Louisville. I don't hate Kentucky by any means, but I'm a Card man. No doubt. My son is right there with me.
Nice. Well, Denny, I'm definitely not going to call you Harry Potter, as I've seen some people say in the past. It's been a pleasure. I really appreciate you taking time out of your day. I know you're a busy man. You have a lot that you have to supervise, but I appreciate you just taking a little bit of time out of your day to come through and talk on the podcast and talk bourbon. Again, just want to say thank you.
No, hey, thanks for the invite, Larry. Hopefully we can do this at some point on site or in Louisville somewhere. Would love to meet you in person, but thank you for the invite.
Definitely. I look forward to it, man. I appreciate it again.
All right. Take care, Larry.
All right, you too. Thanks.
All right. See you.
Really just want to send a big thank you to Maker's Mark. Thank you to Master Distiller Denny for coming through on the podcast and really just dropping a ton of information on us about the bottle selections that they have and just about the knowledge of being a master distiller. They gave us some great selections. They gave us the Maker's Mark 101, which had a nice, full, creamy caramel type of flavor with it. They gave us the Private Select 110 proof, really had a oak and cinnamon flavor with it. Had a little bit of spice, probably the most spice out of all of them. And if I had to give one the nod today, I would definitely give the nod to the RC6 Wood-Finishing Series. The French staves just really just blow you away when you open the bottle. It's such a sweet aroma of vanilla and the uniqueness of the French stave aroma as well. But the taste of it was just fulfilling, nice, full body with it. Just a great bourbon overall. All three bourbons were great. And if it were a different day, I might have a different selection. But today, the RC6 gets the nod. But that's all. Thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure you guys tune in next Wednesday. We'll have another special guest on our episode. Follow us on social media. Our Twitter handle is the PPU Podcast. On Instagram, our handle is the Players Perspective Podcast. That'll do it for this episode. Make sure you guys subscribe. Make sure you guys subscribe and like. I really appreciate your support. Thank you for everything. That'll do it. And that is the Players Perspective.